There is that sound I hear of the boogie woogie music, making me clap my hands, snap my fingers, tap my toes. Oh yeah, makes me feel so good. Ow! Yes, indeed. All right. Well, he just stands here, and we will wait now. Feel the music to slowly fade away, so he can tell all of you in the viewing and listening audience what is on his mind. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Watchwell is my name, and natural philosophy is my game. And you always know, for those of you that have seen this show before, that the emphasis always is to learn something, and that's why we have Albert up here, and he gives us great inspiration. And on the last show, now this particular show is being shot on the October 8th, and the last show was shot on the 30th, so it'll be aired when we get out there to air it. But anyway, when the last time we did the show, remember we had a great big picture of Albert, and I'll bring him back at a future time because he's always worth a good look. Now this is an interesting day because yesterday, this is just kind of in the wake of the president who was visiting us yesterday. And in fact, they said it was the first time that there was a sitting president who came to Wausau since Jimmy Carter was here 24 years ago. So it was a kind of a thrill for all. It turns out that Watchwell did not get a chance to go to the park. I was planning on going and something came up. And so I was kind of busy doing other things. But you could feel all this kind of this federal energy. The helicopters were going over my house because apparently I was on the path between Marathon Park and the airport at Mosinee, and they were coming in there, and the police chased all the cars off for the full 16 miles so the president could just race up to do it. So when the president comes to town, I guess it's for some pretty serious business. So anyway, so George was here, and then he was telling everyone what a wonderful man he is, and he wants you all to vote for him. So if you want to vote for George Bush, don't forget to vote on November 2nd. And if you want to vote for John Kerry, then you can vote for him as well. Okay. Now that was about as unbiased as you could possibly get. See, Watchwell never likes to get political, because if you get political, people only get mad at you. So I won't get political. Okay, let's get down to the business here of the program. We will have our P.O. box on the screen if you have questions and comments on the program times, and they will be flashed on the screen throughout. Now today, Watchwell, it turns out that Watchwell, I watch my own show. Not every time. I mean, I watch it maybe once a week. I don't watch it 3 times, even though I could, but I'm not. And so I pick out the things, like say, points that I think I nailed good, and then other points that were a little soft. And it turns out that from the last show, I was trying to explain the equinox, which I just eked out at the last minute, then the music came on. But then I was going to start to explain real briefly of why the sunrises and sunsets occur above and below the east-west horizon in the different parts of the season. And I was running out of time. And of course, now this repeats over and over and over, because that's the whole concept of understanding the ride of the planet. And I have probably, in the last 3-4 years, I do a show a year. So I'm not going to do a whole show on it, but I'm going to spend maybe about 10 minutes and kind of one more time go through there. Tell me where to look here. Go through this descriptive geometry to understand that a little bit, because it's amazing how people can live their entire life on this planet, and sometimes they don't even understand where the moon is, at different times of the month. And sometimes it's the same thing with the sun. Sometimes people say in the summertime, well, the sun's over there, and wintertime, the sun's over there, and they just kind of know it by raw intuition, but don't get too much into it. So I'm going to explain. Again, it's, I guess they say, what's the old saying? Repetition is the mother of all learning. So even though you've seen this before, bear with me. I'm going to go through it kind of quick. But the main crux of the program, the reason why I'm going to spend a little time with this today is there's no secret, ladies and gentlemen, that in the Wausau area, there's an awful lot of construction going on. Watchwell lives in Rib Mountain, and the streets are all torn up and everything. And they're building the new bridge. And everywhere you look, on the roads, on the highways and everything, you're seeing these cranes. Cranes. Like the cranes. What I mean by crane is not the birds that fly on the river, but what I mean by cranes is, the cranes, that are like picking up things, the big cranes that look like steam shovels, and so on and so forth. And they're working all over the place. And if you other than just seeing them and just saying, "Oh, there's a big machine," and "Oh, I guess the guys who work for the DOT, they pick up stuff and move it around." But it's worth it to understand a little bit of how and why cranes are capable of doing what they're doing. So it's kind of an offshoot of a college course. What young men who are studying perhaps engineering study this kind of stuff. And so I'm going to spend a little time with that, and I think it'll be kind of fun. And if nothing else, you can just look at a crane in a slightly different way and say, "Oh, that's the boom of the crane," or "Oh, that's the tension cable," or something, something, something. That's the ballast, and maybe you'll get a little bit more out of it. So that'll kind of like be the major thrust. But what I want to do now for your viewing and listening pleasure is I want to just one more time, kind of go through a little bit of my Earth geometry, which I've done. That's the whole premise of this show, is kind of understanding the whole planet business. And it took me any number of years to figure it out, so I shared with you it. Now remember, ladies and gentlemen, here one more time, can we get a close-up, Andy? Remember that I always use for this thing the Farmer's Almanac as a kind of like the ongoing textbook. And the new ones are out. In fact, I haven't got mine yet, and I have to get it. So if you haven't got it in the past, you better buy it. 2005. They're going like hotcakes. But let me kind of pick this up here because I want to kind of explain that. I ran out of time, so I'll just back up a little bit and spend like no more than 10 minutes. So what I was explaining as the program was ending last time, I was talking about the concept of the equinox. Equinox is how the whole thing was starting up. So the equinox is like this, okay? And again, I'm just going to kind of go a little bit fast here. But looking at the earthy proof from the top, if you're just looking right at the top of the world, is at the equinox time, they were just say approximately 9/22 of every year, the planet is on that side of its cycle, and of course the sun is out here. Therefore, this would be what they call the line of illumination, and all that really means is that if the sun is the big giant light bulb, so to speak, well, obviously this side is lit and this side is dark, okay? And the reason why you get this concept of the equinox is because it's at that particular time in the orbital cycle that and this happens exactly in spring, it happens in fall, is that the planet is perpendicular, see? Perpendicular to the sun, right? You know what perpendicular means, right? It's like 90 degrees. So the planet is perpendicular to the sun, and so hence it is that for that reason why you have the 12 hours of darkness and the 12 hours of light. And this happens in the spring, it happens at the fall, and that's relatively easy to understand, but when it gets in between, that's when it gets kind of kinky. So, but one more time, this is kind of like where I ended, and I'm going to pick it up from here. So again, I'm going to take this point down and bring it down, a little descriptive geometry here, so bear with me. So this is our 45th parallel, okay, and as we're rotating in our 24 hours a day, and again, because I said that it is exactly even 12 hours of dark, 12 hours of light, hence, when we look out at our east and west horizon, like pretend that you're, I don't know, let's see, if you take away all the distractions, pretend that you're like on the ocean and you're sailing on a ship, okay? And there's no distractions, there's no cities, there's no trees, there's no houses, and you look out either when the sun directly rises in the morning or when the sun sets directly, in the evening, and if you had a compass on the time of the equinox, that would be in the spring and in the fall, is that the sun would appear to be exactly on the east-west horizon, okay? And again, because it happens to be that the planet is perpendicular to the sun at that time. Now, here's where we got to kind of jump off and stick with me, because here's where it gets a little sticky, and it's not obvious. And Watchwell has looked in any number of textbooks over the years to try to find people to explain this, and I really haven't found good things. So what I did is, on my own computer, over the years, I have generated any number of my little plates I've generated to explain the descriptive geometry. Okay, here we can get a close-up, Andy. Here you can see again, this is the Watchwell descriptive geometry plates, okay? And it's really quite simple. I just represent, the pink represents the sun, and then it just shows like the planet from the top and then the planet from the side. And then you kind of like make a third view, what they call an auxiliary view, and then you can trace, the amount of sunlight and so on and so forth. And it gets a little complicated. But I've just explained to you how the planet this equinox business occurs. But now we are now getting into the phase where the days are becoming shorter. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to go one more time. So now, let's see, I don't want to spend all time on this, but we would just pretend that now, kind of like in the Where Are We segment, okay, so we're saying that our equinox was back to 922, so now we're back on the big Earth racetrack. So now we are past this point, so now the planet, we're already 10:08, so now we are already a little ways past this point. Therefore, the planet is no longer exactly perpendicular to the sun. Because remember, as the Earth goes like this, the axis of the Earth always stays kind of like in a straight line with itself. But then the sun appears to move. When we get into a different place in the cycle, like now we are past the equinox, so then the sun appears to be out here. Hence, with respect to that axis, we are no longer perpendicular to the sun. And because of the angularity of the planet, then the shadows start to fall different. Now again, this gets kind of involved, but I just wanted to explain to you that Watchwell clearly understands this. It's taken me a while to do this, and I clearly understand it, and my ongoing fight is to make it so you understand it as well. And it's not always that easy to get it all out. So here we go. This is it. And I'm just going to do one more instance of in effect, what is happening between now and Christmas, and then the other parts of the Earth somewhat of the same pattern. But I'm going to do this real quick now. So again, here we are. We're going to move in one more time. We're looking at the planet from the top, and the general direction of the planet always, because it's a big long orbit, tends to be a straight line. However, it's like I said before, is that because we're past the equinox, the sun appears to be out here somewhere. Hence, we go from the sun to the planet, and therefore, again, I use that perpendicular business. Therefore, it goes to the fact that the planet is somewhat perpendicular to the sun. So then this particular point right here becomes the line of illumination, okay? It's like I said before, what's on this side is light, what this side is dark. And it's interesting to note that if this were drawn into a real good scale, you would start to notice that, because remember we said before that you were talking about cutting everything exactly in half, and by the half would mean that half of the time it's light and half the time it's dark. Now it turns out that once you get past the equinox, if you would do this in somewhat of a scale and you would divide this up, you would find out that there is less than 12 hours of light and more than 12 hours of darkness. And to reinforce that intuition, oh boy, my time's flying here. To reinforce the intuition, we look in the old trusty dusty Farmer's Almanac, and on the 8th of October, lo and behold, it tells us that there are now 11 hours and 24 minutes of light. So hence we have already lost a half an hour of light. So we take this business over here real quick. I'm just going to start picking up here. So the planet always is rotating counterclockwise. So this becomes the sunrise. This becomes the sunset as we're rotating. There's now a little bit more darkness than there is of light. And to explain, looking at it from the top and then taking from this and making one review, I'm going to try to explain why you're starting to see the sun sets and the sun rises below the horizon, below the east-west horizon. In other words, if you're looking in the north and the sun comes up in the morning, it tends to be in the south, going to the south. And how that occurs is, again, one more time, I'm going to try to do this, showing you my descriptive geometry, is the planet comes over here. So now you're looking at it like from the side view, and this same point comes over here, and you got the same 23.5 degrees over here. But because the sun rays always come perpendicular, is that the sun always is going to be shining perpendicular. Therefore, as you get over here, your sunrise and your sunrise is going to start being a little bit less than this would be exactly 12 hours. It would be 12 hours light, 12 hours of dark. But when your sunrises and sunset get on the other side, and the sun rises and sunsets are always perpendicular, hence, if you look out on the horizon, it appears that the sun is rising or setting in the south. And the exact reverse is true in like the summertime, and when you get past spring and you're going towards summer, then the sunrises appear to be to the north. Again, this is every time I get almost scared, because every time I do this subject, I watch my own show and then I say, oh, Watchwell, you didn't say it right, or you made a mistake, or you could have explained it better. And it is my ultimate challenge. My ultimate challenge is to try to get everyone to understand the descriptive geometry of the planet, so you can understand how the planet works the way it does. Because we're all here and we might as well try to understand our lot. Okay, so be it. That's enough for my descriptive geometry. Okay, so we talked about Bush. Okay, we talked about the days getting shorter. Okay, now we're going to talk about the crane, the crane. Okay, remember that show? Where they had, what was that, some stupid treasure show, and then that little guy would say, the plane, the plane. Well, we're going to talk about the crane, the crane. And the reason why I want to talk about the crane is because I just want to kind of introduce the concept of what's called a free body diagram. And all that means is that when you look at something, is that you can always look at it in a different way, and you can always start to kind of take it apart. At least, I mean, I don't mean pull up with your toolbox and start wrenching away. I just mean mentally look at the situation and try to understand how it works the way it does. So again, the reason why I chose this topic is because, again, they're building the new Snake Bridge, and they're doing all the work on the highway. And when I go from my house into town, I see probably no less than about 8 or 9 cranes. I mean, they're just all over the place, like kind of like one of the, kind of like big Baronosauruses, kind of on the land. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of quickly draw a picture of a crane and try to explain, more or less in 25 words or less, you know, how it is they work and how it is they're able to do what it is they do. And it's really quite interesting. I mean, I've never worked at a place that makes cranes, but it's pretty cool. Except one of my shows, I don't know if I have any time to mention this, one of the shows that I did do a couple of years ago did have to do with the crane. And if maybe some of my longtime viewers will remember, is we talked about the old Blue, which was the crane that was putting together the Miller Park, and it blew over. And that was a rather tragic event. And I explained why that happened. Is because I said that a crane is a two-dimensional machine, okay? A two-dimensional machine. I'll try to explain what that means in a different. But first of all, let's just look at a crane, and then I'll just try to explain, you know, just some of the workings of the crane and why it works the way it does. And it's kind of simple, but yet it's kind of not so simple. Okay, so we have the crane here. So this is kind of the picture, but I'm going to start putting these little arrows here, and then that's what you call kind of like a free body diagram. So you can kind of understand what some of the forces are that are involved in the crane. Now, how the crane works, essentially, you kind of know what they look like. You know, it's kind of like, the tracks over here kind of looks like a bulldozer or like a big army tank, where they have like the big metal things, so they can kind of go on the ground or the rough terrain and do what they do. And then of course they have like a big kind of like a mounting system over here. Again, a kind of, it's called like a turret, like a tank. So then as the crane is sitting here, you know, you got like the tracks over here, and then as the cab's over here, because it has this kind of round business here, the crane is free to rotate. Okay, so then the boom comes out here, and then the crane can rotate to like pick something up here, and then go over here and put it down there. Okay, so you kind of understand that by intuition. But what I'm going to try to explain here is to try to get a better understanding of the what they call the concept of the moment or the ballast. And that's where, just by looking at it, just, you know, you don't really quite get it unless somebody helps explain a little bit to you. Oh, free body. It stands for free body FBD, free body diagram. Okay, so what is ultimately going on, because you have this big thing with a tank track, then you have a cab over the front, and then here's the part that you probably don't know, is that on the back side of the crane, usually you just see a big thing and they're just kind of painted, and what they really end up having is like literally tons of big heavy like steel or cast iron sitting in the back as a ballast. And by ballast you mean something that balances the weight. Okay? And this particular piece is called the boom of the crane. The boom, 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 like a boom on a ship. And this is called the tension cable. And that's probably one of the coolest features. And then there's like another little piece that comes out that just kind of connects the boom, like when they travel or something, they just connect it to hold it in place. But what really ultimately does all the work on the crane really is there's like a big engine. I mean, they probably have, who knows, probably a 500 horsepower engine with a big, like a cable system. And what they do is they control all this, like a cable that makes the tension cable, get longer and shorter, and of course controls, this piece over here that picks up the weight. And so as the thing works, there's a couple things that are going on. It's like I said before, is the crane can pivot this way, because it want to pick something up here, and then pivot it, and drop it up there. And then the other thing that goes on is that the boom itself, it can like either rise or fall. And so if you look at the crane, sometimes you'll see that the boom is like way up high and they're picking up something, who knows, some steel or something, and it's in a position somewhat like this. And then sometimes there may be a situation where if it's not a real heavy weight, the crane may be way like this, and then the tension business would be way out here. But there's a limit as to how far they can extend the boom down, because it has to be counterbalanced by this ballast back here. And I get a couple minutes now, I'm going to try to explain that to you. So it all becomes kind of tenuous. Now, as I did this, I dug into one of my old statics books from college, and I got the whole thing here with the free body diagram and then the math and all that. But for a show such as this, I'm not going to go into the whole business of the summation of the X forces and the summation of the Y forces and the summation of the moments. That would be way over and above what you can try to get out of a show like this. What I'll try to do is I'll be satisfied and just try to get out the concept of how all these things break down. So let's quickly review where we went. Okay, so we've got the tracks, we've got the turret, we've got the cab, we have a big engine that controls the cables, and there's two sets of cables, and that's important to understand. There's two sets of cables. One controls one cable, and again, there's all pulleys and gears and stuff, but that's beyond the scope here. One cable is the one that actually controls the weight. So there's like, say for instance, if the weight is on the ground, well then obviously, you have to let out the tension in the cable all the way, and then you pick it up, and then as you pick up the weight, then of course there's some device stuff back here that's winding up the tension on this to literally pick up the weight. But what really kind of makes the whole ball game work here, and here's what I'm going to try to get out real quick, is the concept of the tension cable. Because the boom pivots. See, this is like a big mounting device, whatever it is, because it's big durable machinery. They probably got, who knows, big bolts, probably this big, or some kind of special pins that allow it, or bearings or whatever, to let it pivot. And all the weight, and it's quite strong because they're usually built like trusses. So in effect, the boom is like a big column, and it can take quite a bit of weight. But like I said, where the whole ball game comes in understanding cranes, is what I said is the tension cable and the ballast. Now that's kind of like where the rubber meets the road. Now let's see if I can. Oh boy, my camera's running off. Let's see if I can kind of clean up my sketch here a little bit so you can understand how the forces have to balance to make this all work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to make, again, without I know you haven't studied statics in college, is I'm just going to try to show a kind of an idea of where the forces have to balance, kind of like what you can understand. It's kind of like a teeter-totter. You understand the concept of a teeter-totter is you have a pivot point and a force here and a force here. And if one of the forces is greater than this force, well then obviously the whole thing will tip down. And the same thing will happen with the crane, is if there's too much weight here, if it's extended too far or too much weight, then the ballast isn't strong enough. So what happens is, let's just pick a point. We're going to pick just a point in the middle of the machine, and I'm just going to draw some lines. And so we're going to have, basically you've got a weight here, which is the weight of the boom in its machine. You've got a line here, and this is going to be the weight of the whatever the heavy thing is they're picking up, a bunch of steel. And that's like, again, another one like on the teeter-totter concept. And then over here, then you have two forces that are just kind of holding up the whole thing so it doesn't fall down to China. But here's where it's really cool, is you have, basically you have another kind of, exact thing here, is you have from the tension, because the tension goes in three directions. It goes like that away, and down. This tension over here goes over here, and that tension force has to balance over here, has to balance the ballast force. And that is the beauty of the whole thing, is you have, again, you have the weight of the boom and everything else. You have the weight of what it is you're lifting, but then it all goes through a theoretical point, and the tension in this cable and the tension in the ballast, these two end up being kind of like the forces on this side of the teeter-totter. So you have like this, the weight of the machine, the weight you're lifting, and then you have the force of the tension and the force of the balance. And these have to balance like a big teeter-totter. And that's pretty much the beauty of the whole thing. Now, this got a little messy here, but the reason why I wanted to get this show out was because in a month or so, some of these devices will be out of the area, and then you won't see this. And so sometime you may just remember that, yeah, I saw a guy on television once who was trying to tell us all about cables and ballast and everything else. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think I hear my music in the background, so I think I'm going to wrap it up for today. Watchwell is my name, natural philosophy is my game, and for all you civic-minded people, remember there's going to be a presidential debate, and so you should watch it, even though this show will probably be on long after that fact. See you later, alligator. Bye-bye.